So I'm going to talk about something that also has no actual answer for everyone in this room, because it's a very personal thing, but ways to manage your time. And I think for graduate students, this is a particularly difficult challenge, particularly if you're coming from undergrad. You have midterms, you have final exams, you have assignments, there's due dates associated with them. Then you come to grad school, and it's like, well, in 4 years, you should have a PhD thesis, and good luck with that, right? So all of a sudden, all these regular time, deadlines, requirements that you need to deal with, you have a few, but most of them go away. And instead, you have this giant thing to do over an extended period of time. And it can be extremely daunting. And I think it's an extremely big source of stress as well, right? Because now you have to figure out, okay, how do I actually manage my time? And as Simon has said, there's always another experiment to do. There's always another code to run, right? So how do you actually get through that? So I was going to have you talk about this a little bit. I'm not sure we have time to do that in a time management seminar, which is kind of depressing. But we're still going to take a minute or two to do this. So just turn to your neighbor. And I want you to ask the question, how do you keep on task with multiple demands? So what is your strategy if you have 5 things to do that are in your mind with various deadlines or maybe no deadlines? How do you determine what to do next or what you're going to spend your day on? Okay? So just spend a minute or two, chat with your neighbor on it. All right. Sorry, I was hoping to do that a bit longer, but any sort of key things that you heard in that 2 minutes that you're like, ooh, yep.
Me and Nate were chatting, and we agreed that unless, if there's a hard deadline for something, you prioritize that. But if there's not, if I may quote my friend here, it's you level everything based on the degrees of shittiness. So if it's a really shitty task to do, and you're just not feeling it that day, you're just like, you know what, I'll do the thing that is easiest for me to do in this moment, or maybe not easiest, but I am feeling the most prepared to do it right now, because you will be more productive than forcing yourself to do something that you're just not in the right headspace for. So prioritizing based on how you feel in that day is an important thing.
That's true.
Personally, if I have a list of things to do, and then some of them are really easy, I just need to send an email to this person. If let's say you have 5 things to do, and 2 are send an email, and 3 are read a paper, do analysis. Sometimes I'll just do the email even if it's not as urgent, because then in my head it's I don't have 5 things to do, I only have 3 things to do. So I find that useful just to declutter my brain, I guess.
Anybody else?
Yeah, on the decluttering trend, it's write it out so that all those tasks aren't floating around in your head. Give yourself some mental space to focus on the task so you can work on it with a clear head.
Anybody else want to share anything? Okay, well, my seminar is done, so thank you. No. Well, just to give you some stats here, I think these are hard to read, I realize, but I'll read them to you. 20% of the average workday is spent on crucial and important things, which means 80% of the average workday is spent on not crucial and not important things, because I can do math. Even though I'm a polymer scientist, you math people, I figured that one out. And the average interruption, this I think is interesting. This is a result of research. So the average person gets 1 interruption every 8 minutes, which is 7 per hour, or 50 to 60 per day. So if you add that up, if the interruption is send an email, reply to a Teams message, whatever that is, say that takes 5 minutes, that means that approximately 3 hours per day is spent by dealing with interruptions, which doesn't leave a lot of time for dealing with what you actually wanted to do. Also, 80% of the time, there's an alternate date, time, or reason not to have a meeting, right? So do you have to have a meeting now, or do you have to have a meeting at all? Meetings can really suck up time, and I think online it was even worse, right? Because it was so easy to hop on a Teams meeting. It was so easy to hop from one Teams meeting to another Teams meeting to another Teams meeting to a Zoom meeting to a WebEx meeting, right? It can get very overwhelming. Also, in the last 30 years, working time has increased by 15% and leisure time has decreased by 33%. And that, I think, based on this mental health thing that Samina was talking about, is a significant problem. Okay? So, let's just talk about some ways, and you've already, oops, there we go. So number one, my suggestion is know how you spend your time. It sounds trite, but you'll be surprised, probably, if you sit down and take a time inventory or log your browser for a day, what you actually spent time on in a given day, okay? And this goes back to this idea of interruptions. So I don't think of responding to 10 emails as, something on my to-do list for the day. But it probably took me an hour to do that, right? So what are you actually spending time on? Are you doom scrolling Twitter, right? Are you responding to messages that maybe are better not seen during the day? Maybe you should be turning your computer on at the end of the day and dealing with that, right? So inventorying your time, I think, is a great first thing to worry about when you're talking about time management. What are you actually spending time on? And are those things actually important, or the things that you want to be spending time on over the course of the day? Now, and this can get creepy, right? So there is time tracking software that will show you what you're doing at any given time on your computer, things like that. Sometimes that can lead to more stress. And if that leads you to more stress, you should absolutely not do it, right? But I think just awareness of what you're doing on a minute, or 10-minute, or 15-minute, or hour basis on a day, I don't know if all of us really know that, right? We all have an idea. I'm not sure we all actually understand it. Then prioritize the tasks that are most important. So just based on the feedback, right? What's urgent versus what's important. Obviously, the urgent stuff, if there's a deadline, if someone's counting on you to do something, whether you feel like that's something you want to do that day or not, maybe that's something you have to do. But there's a lot of important things that we have to do that don't necessarily have deadlines, and there's different types of important things we might have to do, where in one headspace or how I'm feeling, if I'm tired that day, something might be easier to accomplish than something else. Also, keeping your values and goals in mind when you're prioritizing, right? What's actually important to you? What do you get the most, positive feedback from? What do you feel the best about what you did at the end of the day? And again, from a mental health perspective, I think that can be useful, right? So if there's a task that's important and another task that's important, and one of those is going to make you feel like you really accomplished something in a day, and the other one's going to make you feel like, right? That might be one way you can think of to allocate those tasks. And also questioning what the result of the activity will be, right? There's lots of demands on your time. There's lots of people needing things from you, okay? So if I invest X amount of time in that activity, what will the outcome be? Is the outcome going to be a positive outcome? Is it going to finish something? Is it going to help somebody? Is it going to get me, advance of my project? Whatever that is, right? So sort of taking a look at those tasks that you have in your mind and assessing a value proposition to them. It sounds very businessy, but thinking about, what is going to be the most profitable way for me to spend my time, even if it's maybe not the most, most urgent. And that's sort of sorting through that can help you say, okay, this is the thing I need to do now, this is the thing I'll do next. The next thing I want to recommend you do is create and maintain a to-do list. And there's various ways to do this. And I think it was said in the discussion, write it down, right? There's nothing more satisfying than having something on a to-do list that you delete, right? As it says, that's something that I no longer have to do. And if you're just thinking about it, you'll just be thinking about the other 15 things that are in your brain, right? If it's on a list, written down somehow, somewhere, and you can delete that, it's very, 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 very helpful. So, but this is, again, very difficult to have sort of a universal suggestion for you. So when to make a to-do list, I think it can depend on the person. Some people do it in the morning, right? So this is what I need to do today. Some people put very specific timelines on it. So from 8 to 9, I'm doing this. From 10 to 11, I'm doing this. Some people just have a list of things that they would need to accomplish in the day. And whenever those happen, depending how you feel or what happens during the day, you check them off. Some people will do it by a week. Some people will do it by a month, right? So again, I think this depends really on how you wish to prioritize and process tasks, right? For some people, it'll be much less stressful to have a hour-by-hour thing where you can check things off and say, yep, I'm done my 10 o'clock task, let's go on, right? For other people, that's going to be incredibly stressful because if the 10 o'clock task goes to 11:10 instead of 11, you're like, oh no, I'm way behind for the day. And that's going to be actually going to be counterproductive, right? So I think I would encourage you just to try different ways to make these types of lists and see what works for you. What gives you more or less stress? What makes you more or less productive? Because I don't think it's a uniform answer for everybody. And the other thing is, I think, you realize when you're most productive. So I am not a morning person. I am most productive around midnight to 1 a.m. when I really want to go to bed, but I'm sort of still not asleep, right? So my group will get emails from me at 2 a.m. I'm not expecting them to reply at 2:30, but that's when I'm working, and that's when my brain's in the game, right? So figure out when that time is for you. And those most important tasks, and in project management, they're actually called MITs, most important tasks. That's when you should be planning to do those things, okay? Because that's when you're thinking about it, that's when your brain's really in gear, that's when you're motivated. And again, that's going to be a different answer for everybody. Set goals and deadlines for yourself on timelines, as I talked about, but make sure you maintain some flexibility. And the last thing I'd say, make the items on your to-do list things you can control, okay? So finish thesis is a terrible to-do list item. Let me just put it that way, you know? Middle East peace. No, I wouldn't put that on the to-do list, right? Say, okay, do cell adhesion experiment. That's something you should go on your to-do list because that's going to have a defined time. You can finish that, you can cross it off, right? So even writing thesis chapter, I wouldn't put that on my to-do list. I would say finish section on X, right? So it's a much more manageable bite-sized goal, which has a better defined time that you have to do it, that you can plan that more accurately, and you can cross it off faster. And I think that's really, really helpful when you're making these to-do lists. So here, I just copied my to-do list. So this is a Word document that is on my computer, open all the time. And I put them mostly up because I don't think Samina believes that her review paper is on my to-do list. But there it is. It's in the middle. So bold is the things that are on my desk that I need to do. And you'll see there's time, either ASAP, if it's just whenever I can do it as quickly as possible, or there's a specific time if there's a deadline, okay? And unbold is things that I know I need to do, but my group is very interested in this, I can tell. Things that I know are coming back to me, but are not on my plate, okay? Because then I'll forget them, and then I might be surprised. Oh yeah, I have to edit that paper, and I won't be thinking about it, right? So that's how I do it. You'll see there's no weekly, hourly time frame for this because I don't know how long it's going to take to edit a paper. So if I say I'm going to finish Samina's paper in a day, you know, and I don't, that's going to increase my stress level because that's going to back up the next thing I was going to do. So again, just getting an idea of what works for you is really important. There's other ways to do this. So in project management, there's what's called project action plans. This is an example for like a website design project, so a very different thing from what you're looking at. But there's specific action steps. There's sub-goals to each of those action steps. There's an assignment. So this could be useful if you're working on a multidisciplinary project where you're relying on other people to do things for you, or you need training on a particular instrument, right? Putting those roles and those people down can be very helpful because that can be another source of stress, right? Uncertainty to a project, right? When am I going to get this training? When is this person going to give me a result? So having that as sort of subtasks, and then keeping track, like what's the status? How long do I think this will take? And sort of, again, just making sure that things are written down and you're tracking your progress on different time points. The reason I like this as opposed to a to-do list is you can sort of change the percent. So the status column, right? So if you didn't finish something, but you made a lot of progress, that's still something you can change, right? You can put in a sheet and say, okay, I feel good about that. That was 25% done. Now it's 75% done. It's still on my list, but there's tangible progress. So that can be helpful. The other thing people do in project managers is make what are called Gantt charts. And again, this is not for everybody. It takes some time to set these up, but it is a visual tool that organizes your tasks on a timeline and can show how they're interrelated. So I think, how many people have made a Gantt chart for something before? Yeah, it's almost all of you. So you know what this is. But I think if you're doing this for a thesis type thing, the thing I would encourage you to do is be very careful, again, what those gradations are on the x-axis, right? Some people are going to like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Some people are going to like weeks. Some people are going to like months, right? So set it up so that you are in a position to succeed. Don't set it up so you're in a position to fail. And sometimes, like at the end of the thesis, I think maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is right. At the beginning of a thesis, you probably are doing it by a month or by a semester, right? What do I want to accomplish in this semester? So again, it's a very personal decision what that X is. And depending how you choose it, it could be a huge help to you and it could be a huge stress sink for you. So think about how to do that. A few more strategies to think about. Time blocking. So this is, I think, a really important thing. Samina mentioned it in her presentation. And we're spending 33% less leisure time than we used to. Why don't you put leisure time in your schedule? So I play tennis at noon sometimes if I'm working from home. So from noon till 1:30, it says tennis with my friend. It doesn't say work on paper, right? It's in my schedule. If it's in my schedule, it's going to happen. If it's not in my schedule, my email comes in or Teams pops up, and all of a sudden it's 1:30 and I haven't done anything, right? So blocking time off for these things. Sometimes I think the best thing you can do is click on that little online thing on the bottom right of your screen and deactivate your network for an hour, for 2 hours. Then you don't get those Teams notifications. You don't get those emails. It's very unlikely that the world is going to end if you don't reply to a Teams notification within 5 minutes, right? So taking away those distractions and blocking that period of time so you're not getting interrupted, you're not getting distracted, at least electronically, that can be extremely helpful. Avoiding multitasking. And this is one I'm guilty of for sure. But the studies have shown that multitasking lowers comprehension by 11% and productivity by 40%. But what I mean by multitasking, it's not necessarily doing more than one thing. It's doing really different things, right? So for example, when I'm doing accounting, I will save all my accounting tasks for one morning, and then I just crank through them. I do all the purchasing cards and all the approvals and stuff like that. Because my brain is thinking accounting. So I don't have to switch from accounting brain to paper brain to grant brain to whatever else I have to do, right? Thinking accounting, I can crank through that. I remember all my account codes because I just use them for the next thing. And it's a lot easier to get that done. So blocking things together that are at least similar themed, where your brain is sort of thinking about the same thing, can be helpful. And some of this is basically the same thing. Reducing reorientation or refocus time between tasks by doing that type of time blocking, right? Putting like things together, even if they're different tasks. Leaving buffer time between tasks. And again, this is something I think that COVID completely destroyed, right? Because when we were meeting in person, we had to walk from building A to building B. So we would give ourselves 10 minutes to do that. During COVID, you had to click on one team's invitation after leaving another team's invitation, and there weren't any buffer times anymore. And that 5-10 minutes walking from a building to a building, it's a bit of exercise, gets your mind rested and thinking about something else, right? So even if you're in the virtual environment, leaving that buffer time, scheduling meetings so you have 15 minutes in between meeting 1 and meeting 2 can be really helpful. I think it could be, again, a really good way to deal with stressful situations. Saying no. If you look at something based on your values, based on your priorities, what's urgent, what's not urgent, and you think, this is not urgent, it doesn't align with my values, it's not important to me, then the answer is to say no to that task, right? Or to say no to that opportunity. And that can be really hard, right? As there's all sorts of tasks that are thrown at you, there's all sorts of opportunities. You're like, wow, I would love to do that, right? But you probably don't have time to do all these things. You can't go to every seminar at McMaster. You can't take advantage of every training program, right? You have to be selective. So thinking about your values, the time you have, and then saying no to the things that don't meet those criteria. Delegating and outsourcing where possible. As grad students, that's hard. As faculty, it's easy because I just email you, so it's fine. But even if you have an undergraduate thesis student, right, you have to change your dialysis bins, which we do all the time in our lab. Can they do it, right? It's one less thing on your to-do list. And then the last thing I want to say is fight against perfection, right? So it's research. The length of time things take is uncertain. Whether things work is uncertain, right? You're not going to be able to schedule every minute of your day and accomplish that. It's just not possible in this job. So do everything as efficiently as you can, but be realistic with your timelines and show yourself some compassion if you don't meet the timeline. Because it is inevitable in research, you're not going to meet every timeline, right? So again, I think this is a really difficult topic to give you generic advice in, but these are just some of the sort of the tips from time management specialists that I've sort of learned over the years. And I would just encourage you to try something, right? If you don't have some sort of framework for what you want to do on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis now, you just kind of wake up in the morning and say, hey, let's do this today. If you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling burdened in some way, and in graduate school, it's very likely you will at some point if you don't manage this, try something, right? Start a to-do list, start a Gantt chart, try different time intervals, block in time for leisure, and then see what works for you and what doesn't. It could be an experimental process, but if you don't start the process, it's going to be hard to learn what works for you. And if you want to talk about it, I mean, I'm sure any of your faculty supervisors or myself, I'd be happy to chat with you, okay? We are out of time. I will manage the time properly in the seminar. So if you have any questions, if there's a quick question or two, maybe we can take it now. If not, we can just chat after.